Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about major cons that you need to take into consideration before you decide to be a software engineer. I know that my channel usually talks more about the positive and the fun aspects of being a programmer, but I do want to make sure you understand that tech is just like every other industry. You're gonna have your good, you're gonna have your bad, and you're gonna have your straight up ugly. Like literally very ugly. When you're a software engineer, it's not all rainbows, sunshine, like kumbaya. And I feel like I provide a very unique perspective, not only because of who I am, right? But also because of the types of jobs I've done in the past. Like you guys know, I come from an untraditional background. I'm not someone who majored in computer science, and I've had different jobs in the past. I will say though, this is one of the best jobs I've ever had, but it's honestly one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. And there are definitely some days when I'm just like, should I be in this industry? Like, is this the right industry for me? Like, I definitely question whether I should stick it through in this industry. And I just want to be honest with you and provide some real cons about joining this industry. The one thing you want to consider is the fact that this job is extremely stressful. Programming and being a software engineer takes a huge amount of discipline, persistence, and patience. When you're working with large bodies of code, it takes a lot of patience to kind of understand how everything works in a code base, how the pieces work together to build an overall service, especially when it's code that you didn't write and code that is poorly documented. Another example of like something that's stressful in the industry is debugging. This is probably one of the most popular things that people talk about being very stressful. Debugging is probably going to be what you actually spend most of your time doing versus actually writing code. That is sort of chasing bugs, figuring out why what you've written didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out. You're going to be spending so much time debugging, and it's going to be very frustrating and very confusing. Another example of the stress you'll have in the industry is sort of being on call. I'm lucky that my job currently doesn't have that, but there are other teams in my company that are on call. So that means that if something breaks in your service, even if it's at 3 a.m. in the morning, you might be on call to fix that bug. So that's something to consider when you're joining this industry, is that depending on the team you work on, you might have to be on call. Another example of a stressor in the industry is dealing with deadlines. But when you're in the industry, you have very strict deadlines that you have to meet. Like a lot of companies have different ways of managing their sprints and how they get work done. But I think what's common in a lot of tech companies is the fact that you usually have to get your work done in a specific amount of time. You have to be very good with time management to understand how you can manage your work to hit those different deadlines. So that's something that can be pretty stressful for certain people. Another thing to consider is the fact that it's extremely competitive to get a software engineering job. A lot of people think because the tech industry is kind of relaxed with having a CS degree and that it's easy to get a job. That's not true. At least it wasn't true in my case. When you're getting your first job, you're competing with so many different types of people. You're competing with not only CS undergrads, you're competing with bootcamp grads, you're competing with self-taught people, you're competing with PhDs, like you're competing with a wide range of people who are interested in entering tech. So a single position might get flooded with thousands and thousands of applications, especially if you're in a major city like I am, New York City, where you just have a lot of competition in general. It's really important to realize that all because you learn how to code doesn't mean you're guaranteed a job. And you should be really cognizant that it is extremely competitive in tech, and the bar for getting a job is extremely high. Even if you're able to get your first job at certain companies, there's competition within the company. Some companies, for your compensation, you're ranked alongside your other teammates, and you're ranked to see who performs the best. I'm lucky I don't work in a company that ranks their engineers, but this is not so uncommon in the industry, that you might be competing with your coworkers and being ranked against your coworkers, and that's going to determine your compensation. That's something you really want to consider when you hop into tech. Another thing to consider when you're deciding to become a software engineer is the fact that technology is changing rapidly. This means if you're a software engineer, you have to be constantly learning new skills and constantly updating your skills as you move forward in the industry. You can see the changes happening with what companies are cool right now versus what companies were cool just even 5 years ago. Like we've seen, at least in the past, even in this year alone, I know this year has been very weird. We've seen the rise and like the fall of major companies like Lyft, Uber, and Airbnb. We've seen companies that were huge unicorns and were really the cool kids on the block becoming now like worth nothing, like WeWork. The languages that were popular 10 years ago are not the language popular right now and are in demand right now. The truth is that things are adapting and people are finding better ways to solve problems. So that means when you're a software engineer, you have to constantly be learning. Like your company might decide to totally switch to a different language or to update a language, like moving from Python 2 to Python 3, or your company might decide, okay, we don't want to do React, we want to use like Angular. So there are just a lot of things that change within companies as well as in the industry. If you work at a company that hasn't really changed a lot in the past couple of years, but the industry as a whole has changed, but you're still learning languages from way back when, that's going to mean that when you're looking for a job, it's up to you to like learn that on the side. If you're someone with family and you have kids and you also have responsibilities outside of work, it might be a little tricky to not only do your full-time job and take care of your family, but to also, on top of that, be learning a new skill so you can stay marketable. So that's something you want to consider, is the fact that things are moving really quickly, like companies are changing, technologies are changing, and then you kind of always have to keep up with those changing technologies. Also, this might be the one that I guess might spark a lot of discussion in my comment section. There is very little diversity. That actually makes it tough for the people who are minorities in tech. I can make an entire video about this specific topic, but let's first just hop into the statistics. The stats related to the diversity in tech are extremely abysmal. It's like actually horrible. When you're in a minority in tech, you're not only dealing with the tough things about being a software engineer in general, you're also dealing with, on top of that, being a minority, which means that chances are you're not going to be able to bring your full self to work. You're going to deal with loneliness and some isolation if your coworkers are refusing to be inclusive. You're going to deal with microaggressions in the office place. You're going to deal with people who don't believe that you're a software engineer, people who believe that you are not deserving to be in the position you are in just based on what you look like without looking at any of your credentials, without looking at anything about you, and people who are like against diversity in general, and people who call diversity like reverse discrimination. So it's really important to note that like this industry, there's a lot of things that still need to be changed. And if you're deciding to join it within the next couple of years, you are gonna be dealing with an industry that still has a lot of work to do. So that's something you want to take into consideration when you're deciding to hop into tech, especially if you're a minority like me. I don't think this should discourage you from pursuing a career in tech, but I just wanted to let you know that it's not all rainbows and sunshine. You know what I mean? That you will have to deal with a lot more than maybe your other coworkers who don't have to deal with being a minority in the workplace. Another thing I want to mention is that this is not a social job. Like I've done jobs where you do spend most of your time interacting with other people, and you are interacting with other people, or giving presentations, or you're just constantly collaborating with other people. This isn't the case in most tech jobs. Like most tech jobs, you do have moments where you're working with other people and you're talking to other people, but a majority of your time is kind of like spent alone figuring out how to finish your tasks and how to like finish your tickets. This is actually a pro for me. I don't need to have an extremely social job to be happy, but this can be a huge con for people who are extroverted and want to spend most of their time interacting with people and talking to people. Anyways, I hope this video did not discourage you from pursuing a career in tech. I still think this is a great job and a great field to go into if you're interested in it, but you should consider all of these different things. I do think that some of the cons that I gave are not just limited to tech, but it's something I want to make sure that I tell you before you decide to commit all of your time into joining this industry. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.